Raiders of the Lost Ark wasn't just a groundbreaking adventure film, it was a chaotic battleground where cast and crew fought snakes, dysentery, and the scorching Tunisian sun to create cinema history. While audiences thrilled to Indiana Jones cracking his whip across theater screens, behind the scenes, Harrison Ford was nursing a herniated disc, the crew was battling mass food poisoning, and Spielberg was desperately fighting to keep his career alive after his previous box office disaster. What really happened during those brutal 73 days of shooting? Why did Steven Spielberg sleep with a loaded shotgun beside his bed in Tunisia? How did a throwaway improvisation become the film's most iconic moment? And which major actor almost wore the fedora before Harrison Ford? Here are 20 weird facts about Raiders of the Lost Ark that will forever change how you see this classic adventure. And stick around for our bonus fact, the disturbing truth about Indy's relationship with Marion that was deliberately erased from the final film. Let's dig up the real treasures behind cinema's greatest archaeological adventure. 1. The famous swordsman scene was born from brutal digestive distress. Everyone remembers the iconic moment when Indiana Jones, faced with an intimidating swordsman showing off his skills, simply pulls out his gun and shoots him. It wasn't planned brilliance, it was desperation. The original script called for an elaborate whip versus sword fight that would have taken 3 days to film, but by this point in the Tunisian shoot, Harrison Ford was suffering from severe dysentery along with most of the crew. Facing another day of stunts in 100+ degree heat while running to the bathroom between takes, Ford approached Spielberg. "Can't we just shoot this guy?" Ford asked, doubled over in pain. Spielberg immediately recognized comic gold. One take later, they had created one of cinema's most memorable moments, not from careful planning, but from a desperate need to get back to a toilet. What audiences witnessed wasn't just an iconic bit of comedic timing. It was the physical suffering of a leading man whose intestines were in open rebellion during one of the most punishing location shoots in Hollywood history. 2. Harrison Ford wasn't even the first choice for Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones wasn't originally Harrison Ford. It was Tom Selleck. Selleck had actually been cast and had even done costume tests that impressed everyone on the production. His rugged good looks and natural charm seemed perfect for the adventurous archaeologist. But fate intervened in the form of a CBS television contract. Selleck had just filmed the pilot for Magnum P.I., and when the network ordered the series, they refused to release him for the film. Just weeks before filming was scheduled to begin, Spielberg and Lucas found themselves without their lead. It wasn't until Lucas reluctantly suggested Ford. Reluctant because Ford had already starred in Lucas's Star Wars films, and he wanted a different actor, that Indiana Jones found his true embodiment. When Ford arrived on set, he brought with him the fedora that would become part of cinema history. But the costume department initially rejected it as too distressed, not realizing Ford had personally aged it to look perfectly worn. The lesson? Sometimes the second choice becomes the only choice imaginable. 3. The dangerous truth behind the Well of Souls snake pit. Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes? Indiana's famous line wasn't just scripted dialogue. It was Harrison Ford's genuine reaction to what he faced on set. The Well of Souls sequence required thousands of snakes, but when the production team arrived in Tunisia, they discovered the 2,000 snakes they had imported weren't nearly enough to fill the shot. Desperate, they purchased every snake available from snake handlers within hundreds of miles. Still not enough. The solution? The production team added legless lizards and baby crocodiles to fill the gaps, creating an even more dangerous environment. What audiences don't see is the glass barrier protecting Ford and Karen Allen in several shots, or the fact that the snake handler was hospitalized after being bitten by a cobra that had been accidentally imported. During filming, Spielberg, who shared Indy's ophidiophobia, couldn't even watch the monitor during these scenes. Instead, he directed via loudspeaker from another room, refusing to even look at the writhing mass of reptiles that filled the set. The result wasn't movie magic, it was controlled reptilian chaos that nearly shut down production. 4. The melting face scene wasn't CGI. The climactic scene where the Nazis' faces melt off didn't use computer effects. It couldn't. They barely existed in 1981. Instead, what audiences witnessed was the result of bizarre practical ingenuity. Special effects artist Chris Wallace created the sequence by sculpting gelatin and clay models of the actors' heads, then melting them with heat guns and industrial dryers. To capture the horrifying effect, they filmed these melting heads at high speed, 72 frames per second, so when played back at normal speed, the melting appeared unnervingly fluid and realistic. For Todd's famously gruesome melt, they built a gelatin head around a skull armature. As hidden heaters warmed the gelatin, gravity did the rest, pulling the flesh downward in that unforgettable sequence. What looks like screaming agony was actually careful temperature control of food-grade materials. The MPAA ratings board initially balked at these scenes, threatening an R rating until Spielberg shrewdly suggested adding more bright supernatural light to make the sequence feel less realistic, a change that helped secure the PG rating while paradoxically making the scene even more memorable. 5. The flying wing fight scene left a real trail of blood. The massive fight around the German flying wing aircraft wasn't just choreographed violence, it was legitimately dangerous. During filming, Harrison Ford was nearly killed when the plane's wheel ran over his knee, tearing his ligaments. Instead of seeking immediate medical attention, Ford wrapped his leg and continued filming for the day. But that wasn't the scene's only casualty. The muscular mechanic that Indy fights, actor Pat Roach, was accidentally hit in the head with a real wrench during their struggle, requiring stitches between takes. The explosion of the flying wing wasn't miniature work either. It was a full-scale aircraft built specifically for the film, packed with explosives and detonated in a single take. The fireball was so massive that it melted camera equipment, singed crew members' eyebrows, and was visible for miles. Local Tunisian authorities, not properly informed about the planned explosion, sent emergency response teams thinking a real plane had crashed. What we see on screen isn't just movie violence, it's documentation of a legitimately hazardous day on set where multiple injuries occurred in service of Spielberg's vision. 6. Steven Spielberg directed while battling serious career jeopardy. Raiders of the Lost Ark wasn't just another project for Spielberg, it was career rehabilitation. When production began, Spielberg was coming off the massive commercial failure of 1941, a comedy that had gone wildly over budget only to bomb at the box office. Studio executives were openly questioning if his early successes had been flukes. Paramount only greenlit Raiders because of George Lucas's involvement. They trusted Lucas, not Spielberg. The pressure was suffocating. Spielberg knew his career hung in the balance, so he approached the production with military precision. He storyboarded every shot, came in under budget, and delivered the film 12 days ahead of schedule, a stark contrast to his previous reputation for perfectionism that led to delays. "I felt like I was on probation making this movie," Spielberg later admitted. "I knew if I went one day or $1 over schedule, I would never direct another A picture in Hollywood again." What audiences witnessed wasn't just Spielberg's artistic vision. It was a desperate fight to save his directing career. A battle he won so decisively that he would never again be questioned as one of Hollywood's most bankable directors. 7. The boulder scene nearly crushed its star. The famous giant boulder chasing Indiana Jones through the temple wasn't CGI or a lightweight prop. It was 800 pounds of solid fiberglass rolling at dangerous speed. The boulder was guided by a track, but if Ford had tripped or fallen during filming, he would have been seriously injured or killed. During one take, Ford actually did slip, narrowly escaping as the massive prop rolled past him by mere inches. Spielberg kept this near disaster in the final cut. That moment of genuine panic you see on screen is Ford legitimately fearing for his life. The weight and momentum of the boulder destroyed parts of the set during filming. When it crashed into walls, it didn't just bounce off, it shattered through them, requiring the crew to rebuild sections between takes. The sound of the boulder wasn't added in post-production, it was the actual rumbling of 800 pounds of fiberglass thundering down a track, captured by the production's microphones. What looks like a thrilling action sequence was actually a calculated risk with a leading man's safety that no modern insurance company would ever approve today. 8. The truck chase sequence features Ford doing real, unauthorized stunts. The extended chase sequence where Indy fights his way across a moving truck convoy wasn't just impressive stunt work. It was Harrison Ford repeatedly defying the production's insurance company. Ford was explicitly forbidden from performing his own stunts for the sequence, but when Spielberg was filming from a distance, Ford would secretly switch places with his stunt double, Terry Leonard. The moment where Indy slides under the moving truck with his whip, that's actually Ford, who performed the dangerous maneuver without permission, risking not just injury, but the entire production's insurance policy. "I couldn't let someone else have all the fun," Ford later admitted. During filming, the truck skidded unexpectedly, dragging Ford along the ground and leaving him with severe road rash across his back and arms. Rather than report the injury, which would have exposed his unauthorized stunt work, Ford simply had a crew member bandage him between takes. Go ahead and like and subscribe because we're about to reveal how the iconic opening sequence with the golden idol nearly cost a stuntman his life, and why Karen Allen punched Harrison Ford for real during their reunion scene. 9. The monkey in Cairo was trained to give the Nazi salute. The scene with the capuchin monkey in Cairo originally contained a disturbing detail that was removed from the final cut. Animal trainer Boone Nar had taught the monkey to perform the Nazi salute when seeing men in German uniforms. This bizarre trick was actually filmed and included in early cuts of the movie. However, during test screenings, audiences found the image of an animal performing this loaded gesture deeply unsettling rather than humorous. Spielberg, whose later work would include Schindler's List, recognized the tastelessness of the gag and ordered the scene reshot without the salute. The reshoot cost the production an additional $60,000, money Spielberg personally paid rather than asking the studio for additional funds. Some things shouldn't be played for laughs, even in an adventure film, Spielberg later explained. What remained was still a scene of monkey mischief, but without the uncomfortable historical reference that had initially been conceived as a quick visual joke. It stands as an early example of Spielberg's evolving sensitivity toward Holocaust imagery, which would become more pronounced throughout his career. 10. Karen Allen's drinking contest wasn't acting. The scene where Marion outdrinks a massive Nepalese man wasn't just scripted competition, it was liquid authenticity. When Karen Allen arrived on set for the Nepal sequences, Spielberg wanted authentic reactions for the drinking contest. The production acquired actual Nepalese Roxy, a potent millet-based spirit often reaching 45% alcohol content. Allen, committed to authenticity, insisted on drinking the real thing during takes. By the 5th take, I wasn't acting anymore, Allen later revealed. The massive man she drinks against was not an actor, but a real Nepalese mountaineer named Pemba Sherpa, who had summited Everest 3 times. He was genuinely surprised when Allen matched him, drink for drink during filming. The crew reported that Allen's triumphant table slam at the end of the scene wasn't scripted. It was her actual celebration of making it through the sequence without breaking character, despite consuming significant amounts of actual alcohol. What audiences witness isn't just a character establishing her toughness. It's an actress willing to get legitimately intoxicated to capture the perfect reaction for Spielberg's camera. 11. The film's iconic sound effects came from bizarre everyday sources. The distinctive crack of Indiana Jones's bullwhip? It wasn't a whip at all. Sound designer Ben Burtt created the iconic sound by recording a pistol firing blanks in a canyon, then mixing it with the sound of an actual leather whip. The face melting sequence. That's the sound of microwaved and stirred macaroni and cheese recorded at close range. The massive stone door closing in the opening sequence. Burt recording his Honda Civic's handbrake in an empty parking garage, then slowed down. Perhaps most ingeniously, the sound of the Ark spirits moving through the Nazi camp was created by dragging microphones through the bathroom of Skywalker Sound while recording the natural reverberations. The resulting ghostly noise was so effective that other sound designers have been trying to recreate it for decades. Great sound design isn't about creating new sounds, Burt explained. It's about recognizing the emotional potential in everyday noises. What audiences hear throughout Raiders isn't the product of sophisticated electronic equipment. It's the creative repurposing of the mundane world around us, transformed through Burt's genius into something otherworldly and unforgettable. 12. The entire crew nearly died of food poisoning during the Tunisian shoot. Disaster struck in the form of contaminated food that incapacitated nearly the entire production. Local catering provided a meal that resulted in severe food poisoning for over 150 cast and crew members. Harrison Ford was so ill he could barely stand for certain scenes. Cinematographer Douglas Slocum shot portions of the Cairo sequences while vomiting between takes. Only Steven Spielberg remained unaffected, not because of some miraculous immunity, but because he had brought along a personal supply of canned SpaghettiOs, refusing to eat the local food. With most of the crew bedridden, Spielberg was forced to drastically simplify several planned sequences, including the famous Cairo marketplace chase. What was originally scripted as an elaborate series of stunts through the bazaar was reduced to the more straightforward sequence we see today, with the iconic sword versus gun confrontation being the most famous compromise. Producer Robert Watts later calculated that the food poisoning incident cost the production 3 full days and approximately $250,000 in $1980. What audiences see in the finished film isn't just movie magic. It's the result of a crew pushing through illness to deliver their scenes despite barely being able to stand. 13. The map room scene was filmed twice, in 2 different countries. The mesmerizing sequence where Indy uses the staff of Ra in the map room stands as one of cinema's most visually striking moments. What audiences don't know is that it was completely reshot at enormous expense. The scene was originally filmed in Tunisia with Harrison Ford, but when the footage was reviewed, a processing error had destroyed much of it. Rather than fly the entire crew back to North Africa, Spielberg made a bold decision. He would recreate the entire map room, exactly to scale, on a soundstage in London. The rebuilt set cost $100,000 and took 2 weeks to construct. The beam of light that creates the map's effect wasn't added in post-production. It was created using an enormous mirror positioned outside the studio, capturing actual sunlight and directing it through the headpiece prop. Crew members had to continuously adjust the mirror throughout filming to maintain the illusion as the Earth rotated. We had one guy whose only job was to track the sun with the mirror. Production designer Norman Reynolds recalled, "If clouds came, we just had to wait. What appears on screen isn't movie trickery. It's actual sunlight, carefully choreographed by a dedicated crew member whose crucial role in one of cinema's most memorable sequences remains uncredited." 14. Spielberg slept with a shotgun during the Tunisian shoot. The Tunisian portion of the shoot wasn't just physically demanding, it was legitimately dangerous for the American production. Political tensions in the region were high, with the Libyan civil war raging just across the border. The production received multiple threats against the predominantly American and British crew. The threats were considered credible enough that Spielberg was assigned armed security, but the director took his protection one step further. He kept a loaded shotgun beside his bed in his hotel room. "I wasn't taking any chances," Spielberg later admitted. There were legitimate concerns about kidnapping. The situation became so tense that several night scenes were rewritten for daylight shooting to minimize the crew's vulnerability. Local Tunisian authorities assigned plainclothes officers to blend with the production team, and several scenes featuring large crowds were filmed with armed security positioned just off camera. What audiences see as exotic adventure locales were actually high-risk filming environments where the production team faced threats beyond just scorpions and heat exhaustion. The adventure on screen mirrored the very real dangers faced by those creating it. 15. John Williams created the iconic score after rejecting Spielberg's first choice. The Raiders March, that unforgettable theme that has become synonymous with adventure, wasn't John Williams' first idea. It wasn't even Spielberg's. Originally, Spielberg wanted to use pieces from Gustav Holst's The Planets for the film's score, particularly the bombastic Mars movement. Williams convinced him that Raiders deserved an original composition, but his first attempt was rejected by both Spielberg and Lucas as too avant-garde and experimental. "It was brilliant but wrong," Spielberg explained. "It sounded like a different movie." Under tremendous time pressure, Williams locked himself away for a weekend and emerged with the Raiders March we know today. When he first played it on piano for Spielberg, the director immediately exclaimed, "That's it. That's our movie." The theme was recorded just 2 weeks before the film's completion, with Williams conducting the London Symphony Orchestra through 12 exhausting hours to capture the perfect performance. What audiences hear isn't just a brilliant composition, it's the result of a creative rejection that forced Williams to dig deeper and find the perfect musical embodiment of Indiana Jones. A theme so perfect it's now impossible to imagine the character without it. 16. The submachine gun scene accidentally featured real ammunition. The scene where Marion fires a submachine gun during the Nepal bar fight contains a dangerous production error that somehow made it into the final film. Due to a props department mistake, the weapon was loaded with real blanks that contained actual gunpowder, not the inert theatrical blanks that were supposed to be used. When Karen Allen pulled the trigger during filming, the weapon fired with legitimate force and muzzle flash, causing her to lose control of the gun as it recoiled wildly in her hands. This unplanned realism is exactly what made it into the final cut. When you see Marion struggling to control the weapon as it fires wildly into the ceiling, that's not acting. It's Allen genuinely wrestling with a weapon that was firing with much more power than she had been prepared for. "I thought I was going to drop it," Allen later recalled. "I had no idea it would kick like that." The incident led to a complete overhaul of the production's weapons protocols, but the authenticity of Allen's surprise and struggle made the scene so convincing that Spielberg kept it. Despite it being an unplanned safety issue, that could have resulted in serious injury. 17. Indy's iconic costume came from Spielberg's personal wardrobe. Indiana Jones's instantly recognizable outfit wasn't created by the costume department. It emerged from Spielberg's closet. When costume designer Deborah Nadoolman was struggling to finalize Indy's look, Spielberg invited her to his home. There, he pulled out his personal leather jacket, a bomber-style jacket he had worn for years. "This is what an adventurer looks like," Spielberg insisted, modeling it himself. Nadoolman took the jacket and had it artificially aged to look appropriately worn. The hat went through dozens of iterations, with Spielberg rejecting them all until Ford himself showed up with a crushed and reshaped fedora he had personally modified. The bullwhip was purchased from a specialty shop in London and then aged by the prop department by dragging it behind a car on dirt roads. Contrary to popular belief, Ford did not keep the costume after filming. The original outfit, including the jacket, hat, and whip, is stored in Lucasfilm's archives, with numerous replicas created for the sequels. What audiences see isn't just a costume design, it's the personal style of Steven Spielberg, interpreted through Harrison Ford's physical presence, creating one of cinema's most enduring visual icons. 18. The actual Ark prop was destroyed after filming, then mysteriously disappeared. The Ark of the Covenant, the film's central plot device, suffered a fate almost as mysterious as its on-screen powers. The original Ark prop was crafted by model maker Keith Short from wood overlaid with gold leaf, with fiberglass cherubim on top. After filming completed, the prop was placed in storage at Elstree Studios in London. 3 years later, a fire broke out in the storage facility, supposedly destroying the original Ark along with numerous other props. However, persistent rumors among film collectors suggest the Ark actually survived. Multiple high-quality replicas have appeared at auctions over the years, with some prop experts suggesting the original wasn't destroyed at all, but was stolen either before or during the confusion of the fire. Adding to the mystery, production designer Norman Reynolds has repeatedly refused to comment on the Ark's fate, only saying cryptically, "Some props are too powerful to exist in the real world." What audiences see on screen may be the only verifiable record of the original Ark prop, an artifact that, like its biblical counterpart, has been lost to history, shrouded in mystery and subject to ongoing speculation about its true whereabouts. 19. That wasn't a monkey. It was a trained macaque worth more than some actors. The monkey that performs the Nazi salute in Cairo wasn't actually a monkey at all. It was a capuchin macaque named Cinnamon who had her own air-conditioned trailer and personal chef. Cinnamon was one of Hollywood's premier animal performers, commanding $7,500 per week, more than many of the human supporting cast. Her contract specified she could only work 4 hours per day, required fresh fruit delivered hourly, and demanded a female trainer be present at all times. When filming in Tunisia proved too hot for the sensitive macaque, a custom cooling suit was created for her to wear between takes. The scene where the monkey appears to eat dates poisoned by the Nazis required extraordinary training. Animal trainer Boone Nar spent 6 weeks teaching Cinnamon to fake symptoms of poisoning without actually ingesting anything harmful. The poisoned reaction was achieved by having the macaque respond to a specific hand signal from her off-camera trainer. What audiences see as a minor character is actually one of cinema's most expensive and pampered animal performers, whose salary per minute of screen time exceeded even Harrison Ford's when calculated on an hourly basis. 20. The famous bad dates. Death wasn't the original plan. The memorable moment where the Nazi monkey spy keels over after eating poisoned dates was an 11th hour script change. In Lawrence Kasdan's original screenplay, the informant was supposed to be found stabbed to death in an alley, a darker, more violent scene that didn't fit with the adventurous tone Spielberg was cultivating. Just days before filming, Spielberg and Lucas were discussing their mutual love of classic Warner Brothers cartoons when inspiration struck. "What if he eats something bad and just keels over?" Lucas suggested. The bad dates line was improvised by Ford during filming, a playful pun that perfectly balanced the moment's darkness with the film's sense of adventure. The monkey's dramatic death fall was achieved by having trainer Boone Nar standing below camera level, giving a hand signal that the highly trained Capuchin recognized as the command to play dead. What audiences experience as one of the film's most quotable moments wasn't carefully crafted by screenwriters. It was last-minute, cartoon-inspired gag that perfectly exemplifies the film's balance of danger and playfulness. Bonus fact, The film contains a dark subplot that was deliberately obscured in the final cut. Indiana Jones had a sexual relationship with Marion when she was underage. In early script drafts, Marion's line, "I was a child," was followed by Indiana's response, "You knew what you were doing." This exchange explicitly confirmed that their relationship began when she was 15 and Indy was 25. Lucas supported keeping this backstory, arguing it made Indiana more morally complex. Spielberg fought against this characterization, calling it one bridge too far for the film's hero. The compromise was to keep Marion's accusation but remove Indiana's defensive response, leaving audiences to draw their own conclusions about their past. This subtle editing change fundamentally altered audience perception of the hero. "We were making a family film," Spielberg later explained, "and I realized we couldn't make Indy someone parents would hesitate to let their kids admire. What remains in the film is a deliberately ambiguous hint at a darker history, a small window into an earlier, more morally complex version of Indiana Jones that Lucas and Spielberg ultimately decided audiences weren't ready to confront. Raiders of the Lost Ark wasn't just an adventure film, it was a turning point in Hollywood history, the moment when old-fashioned heroism collided with modern filmmaking techniques to create something timeless. Behind every iconic scene was a story of improvisation, danger, and creative conflict that somehow alchemized into movie magic. The film we think we know is only the surface layer. Beneath it lies a treasure trove of accidents, compromises, and near disasters that ultimately created something more perfect than careful planning ever could have. If you enjoyed uncovering these secrets, hit that subscribe button for more deep dives into cinema's greatest treasures. Because as Indiana Jones taught us, the real artifacts worth preserving aren't just ancient relics, but the stories of how our modern myths were forged.